The recidivism rate in Sweden is 29% after 3 years and 67.8% after 3 years in the United States. Hey, welcome back to another episode of You Got It, Let's Talk. Today we are going to be talking about prison in the United States. Based on the last statistic, you might be curious, what is recidivism? Recidivism is the tendency of a convicted criminal to reoffend. So, if you saw in the previous statistic, the United States has a very high recidivism rate compared to Sweden. So, today we're going to talk about our prison system and some of the conditions. Then we're going to talk about some ways to make it better. And finally, end on some interesting things to potentially increase your education on prisons. So to start off with our prison conditions, according to data from the World Prison Brief, the U.S. prison system is actually the 113th most overcrowded worldwide today, with the occupancy level nationwide standing at 103.9%. So it might seem like, oh, 113, like we're not that bad. Like, okay. It's not a competition to see who's bad and who's good. It is, we should not have overcrowded prisons. And I actually wanted to talk about a video that I saw of a Mississippi prison, and these phone videos were leaked of like how bad the conditions were, what the water looked like, just really gross things. I've inserted here some screenshots of the video, which I will link in the description of this in case you're interested in watching it. And I found out that in Mississippi, you can get up to 15 years of additional prison time just by being caught with a phone. But all of these inhumane jail conditions from the prison were released because of prisoners taking phone videos. So that's a problem. What I have found surrounding education is that prisoners at both the federal and state level do have access to a high school education. In fact, at both the federal level and in most state prison systems, participation in some form of GED education is mandatory. So I think this is great. While I was doing my research, I found a video about the Northwestern prison education program, and it was really interesting. It showed Northwestern teachers as well as volunteers working with inmates, and there's also a class where law students and inmates are in the same class. So I think that's a really cool thing that Northwestern's doing. Another incredible woman that I wanted to highlight here, her name is Deanna Van Buren. She gave a TED Talk called What a World Without Prisons Could Look Like. And I'm surprised this doesn't have more views, but it's really cool. She talks about restorative justice. She talks about creating several different things so that when people leave prison, they have the resources they need to re-enter society. Highly recommend listening to her TED Talk. I also wanted to shout out Designing Justice, which I'm going to share screenshots here of Designing Justice. Restorative justice, time to learn what that vocab word means. Restorative justice is all about addressing that the person who is harmed in a crime, their needs are important and should be attended to, and it's about creating a dialogue between the offender and the victim. A fun statistic here, government research demonstrates that restorative justice provides an 85% victim satisfaction rate and a 14% reduction in the frequency of reoffending. Just wanted to add that this is coming from a UK website, so when they say government research, it could be meaning research in the UK. I want to say that all the work that Deanna's doing in terms of creating spaces that open dialogue and are more about restorative justice and less about inhumane treatment of people is really great. And what's cool about her work as well is that they look to those that have been incarcerated to understand how to move forward. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Involve the people who are impacted in the system to figure out how to make the system more effective. So in college, I went to the University of Illinois. There was this thing nearby where we could volunteer called Books to Prisoners, where basically prisoners would write in letters and then you would mail them books. What was interesting is that we had to we had to weigh how many books we were giving them due to like how much it costs to mail books. But like that's like a really cool program. I know that there's also a program called Write a Prisoner. I think I'm gonna try it actually, see how that goes. So maybe in a future video I'll talk about it. So I actually have started writing someone in prison. just coincidentally within this past week, someone on Facebook that I know posted about it, and I filled out a Google form and I got sent a name, and we're corresponding digitally through kind of this email system. So if this is something that would be of interest to you, I'm going to put the Google form in my bio right away. In a future video, I probably will go more into detail about what it's like. I think one of the most important aspects of the prison system is understanding that these people are going to be going back into society after they are released. Because like the recidivism rate I was talking about, if they are not ready to enter society and if they aren't employable and can get a job, then like what are they gonna do? Like you can't punish someone for like 20 years and then expect them to just like make it into society without any help. So before closing out this video, I actually wanted to highlight a few points from the First Step Act, which was passed in 2018 under the Trump administration, because it actually included a lot of good things for criminal justice reform. So I'm going to just be showcasing different points on the screen and just reading them out loud. So the law makes retroactive the reforms enacted by the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, which reduced the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine sentences at the federal level. The point to highlight here is the retroactive part, because originally this only impacted people after the law was passed, but now it is also impacting people who were convicted before this law was passed. So the law takes several steps to ease mandatory minimum sentences under federal law. It expands the safety valve that judges can use to avoid handing down mandatory minimum sentences. It eases a 3 strikes rule, so people with 3 or more convictions, including for drug offenses, automatically get 25 years instead of life, among other changes. It restricts the current practice of stacking gun charges against drug offenders to add possibly decades to prison sentences. All of these changes will lead to shorter prison sentences in the future. So the reduction of mandatory minimums is great because mandatory minimums make the system very black and white, that you get a mandatory minimum of this many years. But the difference between life and 25 years, while that might be a lot, I also think that there could be more said about 25 years is still a big portion of somebody's life, and maybe there could be more to be done to take that number down as well. The law increases good time credits that inmates can earn. Inmates who avoid a disciplinary record can currently get credits of up to 47 days per year incarcerated. The law increases the cap to 54, allowing well-behaved inmates to cut their prison sentences by an additional week for each year they're incarcerated. The change applies retroactively, which will allow some prisoners, as many as 4,000 according to supporters, to qualify for an earlier release fairly soon. Although there have been some problems securing early release so far, thanks to how the legislation was written. The law allows inmates to get earned time credits by participating in more vocational and rehabilitative programs. Those credits will allow them to be released early to halfway houses or home confinement. Not only could this mitigate prison overcrowding, but the hope is that the education programs will reduce the likelihood that an inmate will commit another crime once released, and as a result, reduce both crime and incarceration in the long term. There's research showing that education programs do reduce recidivism. So a few things. There are several discrepancies about who these different provisions can apply to, and the reason that there are limitations to how much impact this act could actually have is because it impacts people in federal prisons, yet as you can see in this graphic, a lot of people who are incarcerated are held in state prisons. And according to this VOX article, there are states who are essentially ahead of the federal system in terms of criminal reform, and hopefully going forward, states will continue to take more lead. I wish the federal government could mandate things across states, but I know that in this country, states have a lot of power, but that would be really helpful in order to reduce mass incarceration. I hope you got something out of this video, or maybe a new vocab word at least, or something that you want to research. It's super crazy to think that locking someone up for like several years and then throwing them into society is gonna do anything for our country. Whether it's learning more about restorative justice and how to talk about crime in a healing and helpful way, as well as learn more about what the prison system is like, whether that's contacting someone who's living in prison directly or just watching videos and reading about what conditions are like. I hope we can better build solutions to address crime in America.